once we realize, get an experience on some level that we're not this body, that what we are is the infinite eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die, that is making this possible, then we realize that this body in many ways is just, it's a vehicle, and all of the thoughts and feelings that come through are like just the clouds of the sky. But what we are is the sky. We are the radiant, self-radiant essence of.
Hey, Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh, Integrating Presence, Inner Skilled, and today I have Dr. Will Tuttle with me. Dr. Will Tuttle, what's going on today?
Thank you, Josh. I'm glad to be with you. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. And we're here to talk about spiritual awakening and all of the challenges we're facing in our society today. But I'm delighted to be here. It's great.
Well, awesome. I'll start you with the standard question. Who's Dr. Will Tuttle? What kind of work does he do?
I'm basically an author and a musician, a husband. My wonderful spouse, Madeleine, is right here, not too far away. And we've been married about 32 years, 33 years, together. Anyway, so I started out things actually in my early 20s. I left home, and I was living in Concord, Massachusetts. I was born and raised in Concord, which was pretty nice because it was the transcendentalist. There was this feeling of being, I learned to swim in Walden Pond and being in the presence of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Alcott and Thoreau. Bringing in the teachings from Asia. I think Thoreau had the largest library back in 1840 of books from Asia than anyone in the whole United States. They were really talking about the Bhagavad Gita and the old Taoist masters and the Buddhist teachings, and kind of bringing that into the Christian tradition there. And so I think I got some of that when I was a kid growing up. And my father owned a whole chain of newspapers, so I was raised in the media. And I learned from that not to trust the media, that it's pretty much controlled by other forces, advertisers and money. And when I went away to college in 1971, back in Maine, in Colby College, I started to dive into Eastern thought and practicing yoga and meditation. And so I read a book actually called Cosmic Consciousness, which was written back in the 1890s by Richard Buck. And he said the main thing is that there's two kinds of consciousness. There's self-consciousness, which is when we care about ourself, which is where the mass of humanity is kind of imprisoned. But a few rare people like Jesus and the Buddha and other great sages and saints and mystics and poets had attained what he called cosmic consciousness. And that just really rang a bell. And I thought, all right, this is it. And I remember talking to my parents about it, and then talking to my younger brother, Ed. And my brother, Ed, said, yes, let's do it. So we decided, as soon as I graduated from Colby, that we would leave where we were living, and we would go to California. We figured that's the best way to attain cosmic consciousness. 1975 was to go to California. So we ended up walking down the driveway of our parents' home with some fresh baked cookies from my mother, heading west with no money. We thought we would be like the sadhus of India and just meditate, and somehow we would be taken care of. And it was true. We were taken care of, and we just meditated every day for hours. We had discovered the writings of Ramana Maharshi, who recommended that you go deeper and deeper with the question of who am I, self-inquiry. So that's what I was doing every day. I was just saying, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Walking down these roads all the way across. We got as far as Buffalo, New York. It was freezing there. So we thought, well, we better head south here. So we actually ended up walking down through upstate New York and then into Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania into West Virginia, into the Bible Belt, which we got really interesting. And we were confronted every day with but we had no money. So we were just sleeping on the floors of churches and talking to people about spirituality. And we got through there into Eastern Kentucky and into Appalachia, and then eventually into Tennessee. In Tennessee, there was a community called The Farm, which in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world. And they were pretty much about 900 people, all from California. So we felt like we'd kind of met everybody in the middle there. And they were studying under Suzuki Roshi of San Francisco's Zen Center. Stephen Gaskin and his wife Ina May were the sort of the spiritual teachers, and they practiced Zen meditation together. So I started to learn more about Zen with them. I was already feeling like this self-inquiry of Ramana Maharshi was very similar as I did more research into the koan practice of Zen, to go deeper with a question as a meditation practice. And so I became a vegetarian there. Nobody ate meat or dairy. It was actually a vegan community, but no one knew the word vegan. So we just said, we're vegetarians. And we stayed there for a while, but it was cold and it was a lot of work. And we felt like heading farther south. So we walked down to Alabama and discovered a Korean Zen Buddhist center in Huntsville, Alabama. And we moved in. And that was it. We had a chance to just meditate every day for 10, 12 hours a day on our own, just the two of us, my brother and I, just from 6 a.m. till like 8 p.m. we just meditated. And that went really well. And we eventually heard about a teacher. It was kind of interesting. They said there's going to be a Zen teacher coming from California. And when we had been at the farm in Tennessee, it was kind of interesting because we were there and we were wondering what to do and if we should stay there or whatever. And I remember we were in this room. It was like the main big building where everybody gathered, and we had the morning meditation together. And everybody left. We were alone, and the room started shimmering. And I said we were sitting up against the wall, looking out into this room, and I said, Ed, look at this room. It looks like it's like this being is in here or something like that. And he said, yeah, I know. I can see it too. And I could feel something coming closer and something kind of touching me on the forehead. And then it sort of disappeared. And then the door opened and this guy walked in with a woman, but it's a big guy. He said, my name is Big John. And he said, we're from Huntsville. I didn't even know where Huntsville was, but it was Alabama. And he said, we just got married and we were on our honeymoon heading to Florida. But I got a voice that said to me, we should go to the farm, which is the opposite direction. So I went, I told my wife, sorry, we had to go up to the farm for some reason. So here we are. And so he came over and he put his hand on my head and he said, and I really felt a huge energy thing when he did that. And he said, I have a vision. There's a man with a staff. I can see he's coming and he will be sustenance for you. And he said, I see a woman also. But that was kind of it. And then he left, but he told us he lived in Huntsville. And he told us there was a Zen center. He said, there's a Zen center, a really good Zen center. You might want to check it out. So my brother and I thought, let's go to Huntsville and check out that Zen center. So we went down there, we called Big John and he took us to the Zen center and I never saw him again. But we were there meditating, hours a day. And then they said, there's a Zen master coming from California. And his name was Donald Gilbert. He was an American. He was a disciple of Dr. Kyung-bo, who was a Zen master that was pretty well known in Korea. And they showed us a picture of him, and he was this man standing there with a staff. And I said, Ed, look, there he is, the man with the staff. He's coming. And so he came, and he really was a very wonderful teacher. And I ended up studying with him for like the next 30 years. And he came and we had a lot of retreats there. And then he had a student of his, a woman from Atlanta, also came. And he ended up going back to California, and we studied with her for about a year and a half. And then I said, the heck with this, I'm going to go out to California. So I went out to San Francisco. He lived in Oakland. But when I got there, I wasn't really sure. And I thought I wanted to go to the California Institute of Asian Studies, which offered a master's program in Buddhist studies. I thought I'd get a master's in Buddhist studies. And right next to it was a Tibetan Buddhist center in the Kagyu tradition, the Kagyu Dorden Kunchab. So I didn't have any money, and they had a room open. They didn't even have a room open, but they had this little closet. And they said, well, you can stay there. So I ended up moving into this closet in the Tibetan Buddhist center, and I loved it. It was really great. And it was a lot of High Lamas were coming over from India. Gyugyam Rinpoche and the Dalai Lama came, and the Karmapa and all these high lamas, and we were studying and practicing. And I went up on a retreat up to Oregon. I was totally by myself for 3 months in a little cabin doing prostrations, doing the 111,000 prostration practice, and did all that, and came back, did all these really intense practices with the Tibetans, and really loved it. But I really missed the Zen kind of clarity, because it was all these visualizations and mantras and really complicated. And Master Gilbert was living quietly over in Oakland, and I would go over and visit him now and then. And one day he said, well, the house across the street kind of opened up. Nobody's there. And I thought, wow. So I ended up moving in and renting the house across the street and just studying with him, for the next few years. And that eventually ended up, there was a Korean Zen center in Carmel. We used to do a lot of retreats down there. And then I ended up deciding to shave my head and go to South Korea, become a Zen monk in Sangwangsa Zen Monastery in South Korea. And that was great. It was just getting up at 2:30 every morning and just meditating until 9 o'clock at night. And it was called a kyolche, a 3-month, intense retreat. And I stayed there only for about 6 months in Korea doing the retreat, and then also traveling to the different temples, and decided that I wanted to come back. I decided to get my PhD at Berkeley and teach college and sort of bring the practice into the world. And so that was a hard decision, but and I regretted it for a while, but then I said, no, this is it. So I've been here ever since, and I got my PhD at Berkeley and taught college, and then I went over and met Madeleine, actually, my wife, in Switzerland. She's a wonderful partner. She's also kind of like a Buddhist nun in a lot of ways. We meditate and we have our life. And she's an artist. I'm a musician. I play the piano, and we spread the message of vegan living, compassion for animals, and so forth. And so we've been doing that now. I mean, we ended up finding a house and then moving into an RV. We lived on the road with no house for 17 years, traveling around the United States. And during that time, I wrote a book called The World Peace Diet, which ended up taking off and becoming a #1 Amazon bestseller and being translated into like 19 languages. So we started getting invited to speak all over the world. We've been quite a few times, actually, to Taiwan and China. They especially like the books there. India, Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, Middle East, North and South America. Really, we've given over 4,000 lectures. I mean, really done a lot of traveling and speaking. And it's been I have to say, it's been a fabulous life. I mean, I really enjoy being out in the world and spreading a message that's based on meditation and compassion and kindness, that's kind of practical, but also has a spiritual orientation. And having had that foundation in my 20s, when I just lived in meditation centers and monasteries for the first, that from 20 to 30, roughly, that or 8 or 10 years, really made I think a good foundation. And we still, of course, practice every day, but we're kind of busy. Like, we're going to be leaving in a few days and heading off for 5 months in our little camper van to do lectures and concerts across the country to Florida and then back again, the big loops. And we love just being in nature and seeing people and kind of creating our life as it is. It's always changing. But it's been I have to say, that teaching in the Bible where Jesus says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and everything else shall be added unto you. That basic idea, if we just focus our primary energy and attention on spiritual practice, then the other stuff does take care of itself. I think it really does. It was kind of, sometimes little miracles would happen, like to my brother and I when we were walking. Somehow we didn't starve. Food would come. We would help people, whatever. But I think underlying everything is the idea that we live in a benevolent universe, essentially. If we're doing the practice of spiritual focus, trying to do the best we can to cultivate our consciousness, doors open. And it's been just a fantastic learning experience for me. And, now I can't believe how fast life has gone by. I'm in my 70s now, and I feel like what happened, it went by so quickly. But it's been a wonderful opportunity to be able to share these ideas. And we've done everything pretty much on a donation basis all these years. And we were able to just buy a little house, which is our temple, we feel. We have now a food forest over here, over in the yard next to us. And we've planted 80 fruit and nut trees. And so we grow a lot of our own food. We really think it's good to be self-sufficient as much as we can for food, and to try to minimalize our possessions, just have what we need, but try to be as self-responsible as we can be also. So that's basically it.
Well, that's
Kind of a
amazing.
long-winded answer.
I feel I need to sit with this for a while because, wow, what a profound start that you had. That's some people talk about coming through the Duca door, which was actually how I got more involved, right? But
Right.
this classic spiritual seeker, I mean, like literally, I just can't help, like, is this even possible for people to do today in America? I mean, it would be a lot more challenging. Let's
It would
just
be a
put it
lot
that way.
harder. Yeah.
In the Buddha, when he set off, after the heavenly messengers, he was a seeker after truth. And it's just so inspiring to hear tales like this. It's and I wouldn't say it's overly romanticized at all. I mean, you guys went through some stuff, doing that. And like you say, skillful actions have skillful results. It doesn't seem that complicated to understand for me at this point in my life. I mean, but before I got into all this, I'd be more skeptical, but that's just, in my experience, that's the way it works too. So wow, and yeah, and then the mystical stuff involved in there, I mean, this was um, physical manifestations of mystical stuff in a way, so it makes it even more profound in a way. And the interesting, you mentioned this, I guess another synchronicity is of course I don't have the huge amount of time and practice, but Korean Zen, I went over to Musangsa in South Korea, was it last winter, and did kyolche for a month, left for a week and came back as what they call hangwan. So I was serving the kyolche, but also getting to practice still maybe 4 to sometimes 8 hours a day. Not as much as a participant, but yeah, incredible experience there, and doing Kangan with a master about every week, and that whole thing. Wow. So yeah, it's things seem a lot easier after going through that intensity in a way, you know what I mean? Because I practice more in Theravada, and it's a little bit more laid back, and not as intense training a lot of times. But I really appreciate that tradition. It was amazing. Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know where to start here. I think if we want to do another one, it would be more primarily about Buddhism. But I want to talk about your world peace diet. My experience with I was vegetarian probably since like maybe a year or two after I started practice in 2012. It just got to the point where I felt low energy. I used to go out and drink in my previous job, and can get completely smashed and wake up with not really a hangover, and that's not a good sign, really. Uh, but it got to be gradually like one drink, and I was hungover from one drink. So like, what's the point of this? Quit that. And then I started getting more and more low energy from eating meat, and even gave up fish then too. I was mostly just vegetarian then until I met my now ex-partner, and she was full on vegan. So that I was vegan with her pretty much until she switched to lacto vegan. And now I'm actually back to vegetarian, but I can just see the life force in you is just off the charts amazing. And now I can see with even with eggs here and there and cheese, how the energy level, and even slight sluggishness too, compared to when it was all plant-based, because there's a life force still there in plants. And with dead rotting flesh, there's no life force, maybe for a couple minutes after they slaughtered the animal, but
Right.
or not even that, probably just a few moments, and then it's just rotting flesh anyway. So yeah, I don't want to get too political, because I mean that maybe turns people off, but I mean, here you are, people can sense, your energy. And that's the one reason I gave it up anyways, for energy. So how did you come on to this world peace diet? I know in Mahayana, they they don't do meat. So I'm imagining you might have learned a little bit about it there. And yeah, what do you say about this? Let's start with the diet because it's really important. We do this, we have to have this. Other than air and water, I would say that's probably the next most important thing day to
Yeah,
day, right?
right. Thanks, Josh. I think the food really is important. It's our most intimate connection, really, with nature, right? It becomes what we are, and with our society, right? We're eating because of our culture, what they tell us. And I was raised eating usual, lots of meat, dairy, and eggs growing up. And when my brother and I went on the walk, we were not vegetarians. We didn't have any money. We would eat whatever we could get. If they had fish, whatever, we would eat it. When we got to the farm, they had 900 people that were all thriving as vegetarians. They said, we're vegetarians. But I realized now, looking back on it, they were what we would call vegans in the sense that they didn't eat meat, dairy, eggs, or even honey. And they were doing it for ethical reasons, mainly because they were saying most of the food we're growing is going to feed animals while people are starving. So we're trying to eat lower on the food chain so there's enough for everyone to eat. So it was mostly about compassion for other humans that they were doing was the motivation. But they also mentioned, I remember when I asked them, why are you doing this? They said, well, do you know what the animals go through? That question. And I was like, oh, I don't want to hear about it. But it was their example, really, that switched it. So I became a vegetarian in 1975. Same year, my wife, Madeleine, actually in Switzerland. That's 50 years ago now. And then I was a vegetarian for 5 years, roughly, in some of the meditation centers and things. And then I figured out more about dairy and eggs, so I became a vegan in 1980. So it's been 45 years. I haven't had meat, dairy, or eggs, and I didn't do it for my health, but it's been great for my health. I have to say, physically, because I haven't actually been to a drugstore to get one pill ever in the last 50 years, or even to a doctor to get for a checkup or anything. I just stay out of the whole medical thing. And I think that's really helpful because then one has to take responsibility for one's health. And my newest book, The World Peace Way, I shouldn't mention it, but anyway, anyway, I just talk about how we can really have good health because I think that's important. The other books I've written are more philosophical. This is more practical. And I think it's very helpful because healthy people are much better for the society, right? I mean, unhealthy people are kind of a drag on everybody. You have to take care of them, and then animals get tested for their drugs, and it's a lot of violence and torture and misery, and it's unnecessary. And of course, there's no money in healthy people. There's a lot of money in sick people, so we're not supported in that. So I've understood that, and I'm trying to encourage people because I'm 72 years old. I recently took this test, which anyone can see. It's an app. I think it's called Don't Die, to tell your biological age. And there's these 7 tests that you can do. They're kind of physical, like how many continuous push-ups you can do, how strong your grip strength is. When you stretch at the waist, can you touch your toes or how far? Flexibility, balance. If you can standing on one leg, how long you can do that. If you can sit down to the floor and get up without using your hands or how much you have to do that. Your reaction time, there's an app where so you put these 7 things in, and that basically scientifically kind of shows what your age is. And so, both my wife and my wife is 77. Her biological age turned out to be 35. And my biological age at 72 is 22. And, it's nothing to be proud of, but it's just, the whole idea is that I think if we're understanding basic principles, I do Tai Chi and Qigong every day. I meditate for a few hours every day, of course, and cultivate, healthy relationships, have a purpose in our life, connect with nature, these fundamental principles, nutrition, organic, whole, vegan foods. You call me Wholeness Will. That's right. We eat only whole, organic, plant-based foods. We grow a lot of them ourselves. Right? We put all our love into the garden. All of our, what goes through us goes into the garden. The compost goes into the garden. So the plants, I think one of the things people have lost sight of is that plants have a certain awareness, I think, on some level of being loved and cared for. And the food, if you do that long enough, year after year after year, like we have 80 trees, that the food isn't just nutritional. I think it really becomes somewhat medicinal, perhaps. I mean, it's like we're growing our own food. We're not just going and buying somebody else's food for them. I think we can develop a relationship with the animals and plants and insects where we're living, and with the local deities and nature spirits. The whole web of life here. And when we have that kind of sense of connectedness, then we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and we're supported. And then when we have a purpose for our lifetime, I mean, the Buddhist tradition, of course, the idea is you have a purpose, which is to awaken for the benefit of all living beings. That's a purpose. I mean, that's profound. That's the Bodhisattva vow that we take, in the Zen tradition. But the idea is that we're living our life to awaken spiritually, and that anything we can do along the way to help others to awaken is planting seeds for the benefit of others. And that's really why we're here. So I think the main things that really harm people's health is the lack of those things. Disconnectedness from nature, overconnectedness with technology that kind of disconnects us, not really having a purpose that's beyond my own self-gratification and achievement and ambition and so forth, and having relationships that are really somewhat based on manipulation and trying to get what we want and so forth, and then not having a time for introspection and listening, because that's the key. I think once we realize, get an experience on some level that we're not this body, that what we are is the infinite eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die, that is making this possible, then we realize that this body in many ways is just, it's a vehicle, and all of the thoughts and feelings that come through are like just the clouds of the sky. But what we are is the sky. We are the radiant, self-radiant essence of being. And when I get attached to clouds coming by, those can cover up the sky. They can seemingly cover up the sky, but from the point of view of the sky, they don't have any power. They can't harm the sky. And so we tend to identify with the clouds, I think, with the passing ups and downs and all of that. And we're taught to do that in our society. And so meditation practice essentially is to relax that contraction around being a cloud, the things that are happening, my thoughts, feelings, aspirations, memories, and the identification with being this thing, this object, which was born and will die. Therefore, I have to get what I want, keep away what I don't want. We get the whole poisons going. So the whole idea is to just really take the time to be and listen and to witness all of this, happening. And for me, it has focused around that question of what is this? That like you mentioned, the Kongan, imogo, they say in Korea. What is this? What is what is it? What are we? And I think that question, we can always go deeper and deeper with it, and as it bears fruit, then the fruit is liberation ultimately. And we have, I think, many lifetimes in order to make progress, and it probably does take countless lifetimes. In the Tibetan tradition, they talk about every being being your mother. We've gone around so many times, and we've been their mother too. So there's this basic sense of just don't waste your time, don't waste your life. This is a precious opportunity, and if you're born in a physical body that's healthy, in an environment where you can hear the Dharma, don't fritter anything away. Do your best. So that's the main thing, especially now. I feel like as I'm getting a little bit so-called older, it gets more and more, I feel like the sense of urgency, like this is the most important thing. So I just encourage everyone to put the time in. Practicing meditation is such a fantastic foundation, and just extend it throughout the day as best we can, and question all the narratives in our society that pull us away from that. We're being bombarded constantly with all kinds of pressures to run after this and escape that, and to just remember the essence of the teachings. There's no greater, I think, spiritual teaching than the Buddhist teachings that focus us back on our true nature. and to realize and recognize our true nature.
Wow, so beautifully put. It's almost like you're being telepathic here on my follow-up questions that you already answered, basically, like with all this health, and then, well, then how do you face death? Because we're not going to, no matter how healthy we are, not as an excuse to blow off health, as you beautifully illustrated, but then how do we face that? You've pretty much gone through that. And I just wanted to echo that, yes, plants have some kind of responsiveness. There's a life force in plants. It's been scientifically proven that when certain things are done to them, there's certain responses, both, I would say, skillfully and unskillfully, and things that nourish and things that don't nourish, and how this complex um, weave that goes into intentionality around this, in the seen and the unseen. There's studies around blessing food too. And it's just, go to grandma's house, and if it's made with love, right? Versus if you're getting some kind of other crappy food, and how you feel about that and how it makes you feel, and things like this. So yeah, it seems obvious to me. Now I have a challenge here. My back with staying with my parents till I go back overseas, and um, it's a big hunting culture around here. It's a really bizarre form of programming, I think, here in the Midwest, of how the hunting. So I don't know. I mean, I talked to a monk about this, and he said it's not your responsibility, and I agree with that. So I'm trying to, because for me, directly mentioning it would probably just make things worse. But on the good end, there's organic garden here, so I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, but I mean, I don't know what you could tell me around this, because it's just somebody that just doesn't get it, and how to be kind to them and myself as well, without being, overly judgmental or preachy, and then, yeah, still authentic as well. Yeah. And yeah, so it's a challenge. I mean, this is great practice, in a way, how I deal with this or don't deal with it too.
Right. No, I think it's your attitude is exactly in alignment. It's a practice, and we find ourselves, for whatever reason, our karma, whatever, to be in situations that can be challenging, and to see how we respond. And there's something interesting though about hunting, in relationship to herding. Herding is kind of like canned hunting. It's like an extreme form of canned hunting. Like the animals are just raised, hyper confined, and then just killed. And with hunting, they're at least out there running around until someone comes by and shoots them. And so I remember, when I think it was Oklahoma, that I gave a lecture there. And I got a letter later from a woman, actually from a man. And he said, well, my wife brought me to your lecture, and we bought your book. And, I want you to know I'm a hunter. I've been a hunter my whole life, and I love animals. I was actually professional. I used to submit my photos and my stories to the hunting magazines. I made a lot of my living through hunting and guiding hunting and so forth. He said, but we read your book out loud together, and now I'm a vegan. And he said, I always loved the animals. I knew I loved them. That's why I killed them, because I loved them. They were so beautiful. And so there's this sort of an interesting psychology in hunters. They'll when they kill a deer or something, they'll say, that's a beautiful animal. They'll really appreciate the beauty, and they feel this kind of, sometimes like almost a sacred act of taking the animal's life. But this is the way my grandfather and his grandfather, and we all did it this way. We got to do it. We love them. We got to, it's part of the web of life and the natural way of doing things, and that whole thing. And so I think you're right. It's best not to go straight into the teeth of it, but just to kind of hold space and realize that we don't have to do that anymore. Right? Maybe at a certain point, we had to do that, but now we can actually grow our food. We can let the animals have their habitat, and I think focusing on the positive, just focusing on the benefits, the fact that if everyone, for example, stopped eating animal foods, that would free up literally millions and millions of acres of land that could go back to being forest and habitat for deer and wildlife. We could feed everyone on a fraction of the land, and the animals could live freely. We would just be so much healthier and happier. So there is this beautiful solution, which is right in alignment with the Dharma teachings. If we just reduce our violence towards other living beings and live in alignment with that. But the best way to do that, I think, is through being an example. And the thing is, since you and your audience are familiar with the Buddhist teachings, I think one of the things I really like is that story of the Buddha going into a house that's on fire, and all the people are in there partying, and he just can't get them to come out. They won't come out. And so the story they tell from the Mahayana point of view, they say, well, so the Buddha went outside, and he had a little small cart, like a donkey cart, and he showed them that to the people, and tried to get them to come out to play with the cart. And then he got a big cart, a bullock cart. So that's the Mahayana. It's a big cart, but all of it, it's just trying to get people out of the burning house. If you go into the burning house and yell, "Hey, everybody, the house is burning," they won't even hear you. They don't care. So you got to go out and try to beckon them through the window. Look, I got a nice thing out here. You can play. Come out here and play. And you get them out of the burning house. Because that's the thing. I mean, people who are hunting, they don't realize that they're in a burning house. And it's just part of a much bigger system of suffering that they're going to end up with, probably some kind of having a stroke or who knows what. And, it's all part of a much bigger suffering, dukkha, as you say. But just, you're outside the burning house, and you're saying, it's really nice out here. If you want to join me.
They're really good.
Planting seeds for a
Sure.
future incarnation.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all you can do, is plant seeds for the next life.
Absolutely. It's really well
You have to see
put.
the big picture, I think.
So this feeds into two other topics I wanted to seek your advice on. Maybe is and you mentioned freeing up fields and stuff. So we have here in St. Louis is like ground zero for Monsanto, which that's been whitewashed now. There's no longer a million man march on Monsanto. Right now, it's like it's whitewashed into Bayer. The good guys that make aspirin, right? Not the ones that were the Nazi nerve gas in World War II, right? IB4. Well, anyway. So yeah, this thing of GMO and ethanol, it's ridiculous. There's so many different sources even for that aren't as intensive. And I even thought I heard that the reason some of the Midwest is so ridiculously humid is because of all the water associated with the corn crops. I don't know. I just heard. Haven't looked in to verify any of that. But for me, it's just common sense. I could imagine, like, if you took our ancestors and showed them what they're doing and just spraying poison on fields, and then everything dying around it, but the food that they eat, that they would think, "What, this is madness." Or you might have another group that say, "Oh my God, everything's dying, and yet that survives. I want to gain that energy, and so everything, I want to be able to survive all this poisoning, and then grab that kind of whatever that is for myself." So I don't. This is kind of a little bit bizarre, far out there thinking, but the traditional thing is, it's been shown time and time again that this really isn't needed, right? As far as I know, there's so many misconceptions around GMO stuff. And in Europe, it was so nice because a lot of it's just banned. It's really easy to get really more wholesome, healthy food just by default anywhere, compared to the States where, thousands, and like, was it over 5,000 chemicals that are legally allowed? But in Europe, it's only like a few hundred or something like that. So it's a huge political football. I know I could deal with this more skillfully than I do, because if I have any kind of pet peeve, as far as on that level, it's kind of one of them. I mean, all for people making money, but when it comes to health and well-being, it's still there, but not poison, basically, is what it is. And we don't even know the type. And I could just go on and on now, so I'll stop. The other thing is this notion, and I just throw these out here and give you time for this. This notion that unfortunately, I think is becoming more and more normalized in the medical field, is assisted suicide crap. And I heard, is it in is it Switzerland or maybe it's Austria, where you just have to get two doctors to declare you competently sane, and then you can go in this little suicide pod and off yourself. I mean, it could just be somebody having a bad day, or I mean, it's not that extreme now, but that's kind of where this conditioning I feel could go. And then,
Yeah.
it's such a huge distortion. Oh, this is compassionate. That's what everybody jumps to right away. It's a really huge distortion, I think. And if this starts to get normalized, it could be really, I think, just detrimental to human well-being and human well-kind, and it could really go downhill potentially. So I just wanted to pick your brain on this and see how you view this and how to deal with this, and any kind of advice you have.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Those are really two big points. And I'll just say briefly, my book, Food for Freedom, I really dive deep into this, but I'll just say, when you look back historically, like you say, you go back a few hundred years, there weren't any chemicals. There was just, people were using, everything was organic. It was basically quiet. There wasn't any amplified music. There weren't electrical fields. All the devastating environmental impacts that we're enduring now were not present. But then Rockefeller, basically, with the huge wealth and power that accrued, basically that translated into a whole system. So if you refine oil, petroleum, you can make a lot more money out of that petroleum if you refine it into petrochemicals. So there was this big, huge spree of inventing petrochemicals that were never even on this earth until petroleum chemists started going into the laboratories and concocting all these herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, flame retardants, different plasticizers and plastics. I mean, just a whole
Pharmaceuticals
massive
too, right?
amount of chemicals and plastics and other things that began getting spewed into the environment to kill pests, so-called, and to make everything, make our so-called modern life. And that increased the profits of the petroleum industry and the new petrochemical industry. And then if you refine petrochemicals one more time, what do you get? You get pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are just refined petroleum that is then injected right into the bodies. And there's thousands of different petrochemical derived pharmaceuticals now that are used, that are taken as pills, that are injected into our arms, and all this stuff. And so this whole thing, people say, well, why would we do that? That's not helping. No, that is exactly helping. That's massively increasing wealth in the hands of 1/10,000th of 1% of the population. Basically has accumulated enormous amount of wealth, and that wealth translates into power to control the narratives that are on the television, to control the education of the doctors, to control the Hollywood movies, and the media and the governmental agencies are all captured. Everything is captured. So that's what we see happening, especially in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's very profitable, and it's even more so, as you say, in some ways in the United States than in other places in the world. But it's happening everywhere, and the way to counteract that, I think, is through what you're saying, resensitizing ourselves to what is healthy, and then speaking up, talking about it, sharing these ideas, so that people can somehow extract themselves out of this conditioning that if I'm going to be healthy, I have to go to my doctor, and my doctor will give me what I need. And I don't have to eat organic because that's not any better. That's what we hear. And so, this massive poisoning of humanity through chemical poisons, through, I think, also psychological poisons, through junk, a lot of fear porn, mental viruses that go around that just terrify people of each other, be afraid, anger, enemies, and then also electromagnetic fields that are happening, the spraying of geoengineering things into the sky that come down onto the crops and into people's lives. So there's a lot of money in this. So therefore, we have to be savvy, aware. We have to cleanse. Really, I mean, that's part of it. And not purchase foods that we know are polluted, and try not to support those industries, because The second point you made about euthanasia of human beings, like especially Canada now too, like you say, Switzerland also, but Canada, they have what's called MAID, medical assistance in dying, which is now being paid for by the governmental insurance program that everybody has, and they're encouraging people, if they get like injured by a vaccine or something, they say, well, your best option might just go ahead. We can take care of it right now. We'll just put you out of your misery. And it's reaching the point now where 1 out of 7 deaths in Canada is from this. They're killing people. I mean, because it's much cheaper to kill them. It's easier. I mean, it's like livestock. I've been saying this I've been warning people. I've been saying, look, if you're going to continue to treat cows and pigs and chickens as just objects to be bought and sold, then pretty soon there's going to be people look at you like your livestock that's just here to be bought and sold and culled. It's time to cull the herd. There's too many people, too many. You can't control them all. We've got to kind of reduce the population. And this is a good way to do it. And so that's why I think going vegetarian, going vegan is really on a deeper spiritual level very important, because if we don't show kindness and respect to other living beings, we're not going to be shown kindness and respect ourselves. And this, what you're talking about, are two manifestations of this that are very real. And so we're in a situation that it's important more than ever that we really understand the Dharma teachings and live them for the sake of future generations, to keep this thing going, because power concentrates, and it gets hard to know what's really going on when all the media has been controlled and the authorities are controlled. It's not easy. So it's important to meditate and to cultivate.
Absolutely. And I like how you painted even more down to earth picture, because my ex-partner, it's a little bit of woo-woo, but I'll say it here anyway. She's having constant interface with, let's just say, things in the unseen. And one of the things that she found out why she was actually vegan is that she's saying that if these certain beings that are doing genetic experimentations, they get their allowances, but they look at people and say, well, you're doing this to other animals, so that gives us the right to do this to you, so then they can't claim that allowance if we don't do that. I mean, it's a little bit far out for some people, but you're just talking about like the humans in charge and their mentality and what they claim and their allowances. Absolutely wild. And the more people that can wake up to these, or just be open to considering stuff like this, and maybe just contemplating it and trying it out in their own experience and see what's up. But this is great advice, and a great outlook too on this. And as you know, you're already so awake to all this parapolitical shenanigans, bombarded on every level. And you just mentioned the things that pretty much anybody who has access to a newspaper can pick up, and with the right kind of wisdom, the right kind of eyes, they can pick up on what you just said for themselves. And as you probably know, it goes way much beyond just where, I mean, here the secret societies and things where everything is thrive, or they get a lot of power with secrecy, and what we don't know. But if people still want to know, then that's not going to stop certain people from trying to figure it out. And sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they get it right and it's too dangerous and they maybe shouldn't have done that. But then we have the other end where things are fabricated, and then we've got so many different intelligence operations running at the same time to muddy the waters, to discredit, and so we're up against so much. And like you said, the narrative, and that's and even in alternative sources now, of course, controlled opposition, psyops, on and on and on and on, and it goes. So, what do we do with this? You have to go inside, right? You have to meditate. You have to, and this is the key. And I feel if we can't change from within, nothing's going to change from without. That old saying, seek peace within, don't seek it from without, and then transform inside, and then everything around us will be transformed. And with wisdom, nothing is everything can be overcome. There's nothing, I don't think, that can be overcome with wisdom, and then the heart will balance out that, so it doesn't get so like cold and snake like, right? So yeah, So we're both kind of preaching to the choir here, I think. But I really appreciate it standing on the shoulder of giants like you illustrated, and here I am on your shoulders now too. So I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing, and just the heart and the enthusiasm. I think that's lacking so much too. That's so needed as well, and
Mm.
balance and groundedness will. So thanks so much for coming on here while we're wrapping up. Tell people how they can get in touch with you. You mentioned a few books, but mention more the events if you want to give people more details on the events. Anything else you want to draw people's attention to, and then a final message, please.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a time where our discernment is so important. Discriminating awareness, wisdom in the Buddhist tradition, using our logic and also our intuition, our inner guidance system that we can connect with. I think if we quiet our mind and listen, because I think it's a military grade disinformation programs that are blasting out to keep us confused. And even like you say, a lot of the alternative so-called media is questionable too. So the main thing I think is to continue to understand that there's ancient wisdom that is still relevant right now, and it has the possibility of opening up doorways of wisdom, like you say, wisdom and compassion for us. But if people like to get in touch with us, the best thing probably is just our website, which is worldpeacediet.com. My name, willtuttle.com, goes to pretty much the same place, and we have the books that I mentioned. World Peace Way also is our new one, Food for Freedom, and CDs of music and Madeleine's art, and our tour schedule, where we're going to be when. We're just embarking on a 5-month across the United States to the southern, to Florida and back along a kind of a southern route in our little camper van, and doing concerts and lectures and retreats and workshops and things. And so you can see there. And then we have essays and the trainings that we give, and videos. We have quite a few videos on cooking and gardening and speaking and music and different things. And we're happy to stay in touch with people as we go on. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks again, Will. And may all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free.